All right. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from today. We are so glad to have you with us. Welcome to the June session of our CPS HR webinar series brought to you by your trusted partner in public sector HR, CPS HR Consulting. Today, we're diving into storytelling for public sector leaders presented by CPS HR training instructor, Lisa Kellstrom. We've got an exciting session ahead, but before we jump in, there are just a few quick housekeeping notes to go over as usual. Today's webinar is being recorded and you'll receive an email tomorrow with the link to watch the replay. You may also find the recording on our CPS HR webinar webpage. Everyone is in listen-only mode to help keep our audio crystal clear for the duration of the session. However, we may ask you to come off of mute if you have any questions towards the end. We encourage you to use the chat to connect and share ideas throughout the session. If you have any questions during the session, please feel free to ask those in the chat, or you may also utilize the QA application on the bottom of your Zoom screen as well. Now, without any further delay, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa. Lisa, take it away.
Thanks so much, Marissa. It's a pleasure to be here today. Welcome to everyone. Great seeing the chats come in. Please continue to say hello in the chat. Very grateful to be here with all of you today. And thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of what I know is very busy schedules to focus on the power of story. It is a big deal to have your time and attention today, not something that I take lightly. So thank you for tuning in. And let us know where in the world. I love seeing lots of California, Cincinnati. I saw an Elk Grove that was down the street from my old stomping grounds. So love to see where everyone is in the world. I'm hoping that this hour is a little bit different, hopefully inspiring, and bringing you into the power of story and how you can leverage it in your work in the public sector. Kick us off initially as people are continuing to get connected to the audio. We're on the Zoom platform today. You can join that audio either via your computer or on phone. And feel free, the more interaction we have today, please raise your voice. Marissa is on hand and generously agreed to keep an eye on the chat and that Q&A capability. So the more interaction and engagement in the session today, the better. By way of background, my name is Lisa Kellstrom. I have 18 plus years of experience as a consultant in the field of leadership development in several different capacities. I'm a leadership coach. I am a leadership developer, a designer of content. I have several lenses of experience into the field. How I see my role here today is threefold. First, really, I hope to be a teacher, so bringing some theoretical frameworks to the fore around story. We're going to take a look at the psychological power of story. We're even going to delve briefly into neuroscience and what that can tell us about the power of story. Secondly, I see myself as a catalyst for new or evolved ways of thinking and being, and how you might be able to bring story into your leadership work. And thirdly, I see myself as a Sherpa or a guide, really helping to navigate this terrain together. We might be learning some new paths or re-exploring some previously worn paths to glean new insight. My goal is to make this hour as engaging and as possible, leveraging some of the tools and techniques that we're going to study together. I've assisted to date over 10,000 leaders in more than 20 countries. I'm originally from Ireland, though it is hard to detect in my accent. That is a country very, very powerfully connected to a history of storytelling. And as I mentioned in the chat, I'm now based in Northville, Michigan, where it is a whopping 100 degrees and thunderstorms booming outside. My professional and personal journeys to date truly have taken me around the globe, and it is a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I partner with Harvard Business Publishing to lead leadership development programs. I'm also a program coach at Decker Communications, and of course, here at CPS HR, where I hope to shape leaders such as yourselves in the critically important work that you are doing. It's truly a privilege to be here. So let's start with some setting the stage together. And this is particularly important when it comes to today's topic because story is truly a community experience. I bring us first to the story of Max Ringelmann. Now, Max was a French architectural engineer in the early 1900s, and he made a discovery at that time that actually speaks to why virtual meetings today are sometimes so unsuccessful. Ringelmann asked a team of people in a room together to pull a rope. He then asked those same people to pull that rope, but to do so individually, separately. And what did he find? He noticed that those individuals that pulled the rope by themselves put in a lot more effort than when doing so as the bigger group. He called this effect the Ringelmann effect. The bigger the group, the less responsibility we each feel to ensure the success of the endeavor. So, as you can imagine, in a virtual setting, the Ringelmann effect is even greatly magnified. We aren't even in the same room together to pull that metaphorical rope. So, I get it. It's really easy to tune out, to feel less motivated. No one's going to notice anyway. Why, right? So, why does it matter? But here's the interesting thing. This tuning out or this lack of effort actually leads to a less fulfilling experience for you. It has been shown for poor meeting outcomes to result, and even according to an early study in the 2010s by Harvard University, shows that distraction actually decreases your happiness. So, while it may be very tempting, very understandable to get distracted during our time together today, it's ultimately unfulfilling, not just for others in the room who can benefit from your wisdom, your chats, your reflections, your stories, but it's also diminishing your joy. So, my ask is simple: put down those distractions, disconnect from the phone, and let's choose joy together today. To get us started down that path of joy and engagement, I'm going to ask you to reflect and leverage the chat feature. You'll see in the chat pop-out window, there's that little smiley face emoji. That's going to open up your emoji tray. You might see some frequently used emojis there, but there's also a host of other emojis kind of by category theme. You can also use the search feature. And if I were to ask you to describe the story of your week in emojis, what emojis would you put in there? Put together a collection of pictures now and see if we can get a sense of what the week is looking like. And as you're thinking about your week, I'll pop some in. And mine is all, oh, I love it, Gina. Starting off strong with the crazy face. Discerning. Love, Christina. You can pick more than one. You can pick a few. Oh, Monique, overwhelmed. Ariel, roller coasters. Yes. James is eating some cheeseburgers. I love that. Maybe someone's going to the circus. This is great. Keep them coming in. This is fantastic. Yes, Marissa, a lot of computers, laptops. Amber's got a roller coaster going too, and hopefully, Amber, that's a birthday cocktail that I'm seeing there. Cheers. Different emotions from Justin. Every phase of emotion coming in there. Cool as a cucumber. Of frustration. Oh, Kimberly, sick. No. Tim not doing so well either. See, this is what's incredible about this, and I'll put mine in again just so you see it. So mine was about sourdough. I'm in my sourdough era, and I'm late to the party. Everyone else has been in their sourdough era since 2020, but I'm only arriving at the sourdough party now, and so I've gotten very much into my sourdough starter and making sourdough bread, and my nephew came to visit over the weekend, and I introduced him to the power that is sourdough and sent him home with a loaf of bread, which he was thrilled to receive. So Lori's got some gymnastics. Love it. This is great. Yes, you know, we're not quite in the sourdough. I mean, welcome to it. It is a powerful one once you get started. It's hard to give up the bread. So you can see just by this very fun exercise, we already get a sense of where everybody in the room is just through the power of pictograph. We've been able to tell stories about our lived experience over the last few days just through these simple emoji icons. And that really tells us a lot. We're going to go now from the power of the emoji to the power of the word. We begin with just 6 words. These few syllables tell a poignant tale, one that carries one could argue heartbreak, ambiguity, imagination. This story is often, though unverified, attributed to Ernest Hemingway. It's said that he was challenged to write a complete story using just 6 words because they had to pay by word for the time in the newspaper publishing. So the result was, of course, For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn. This story really achieved a full emotional arc with nothing but implication, and it boils down to 6 words. Whether Hemingway actually wrote it, the 6 word story illustrates a fundamental truth about storytelling. We are moved by meaning, not just information. This micro story really has power. It activates our readers' imagination and emotion, and that is exactly what great leaders like yourselves need to be doing today, not just informing, but moving. Aristotle believed that the best way to transfer emotion from one person to another is through the rhetorical device of storytelling. More than 2,000 years later, neuroscientists have found that his thesis was accurate. Studies have found that narratives trigger a rush of neurochemicals to the brain that connect people on a deeper emotional level. That's quite something. 2,000 years of wisdom vetted out over time. We are, as Jonathan Goshel once stated, a species addicted to story. Even when the body goes to sleep at night, the mind stays up all night telling itself stories. Some may argue, myself amongst them, that the most powerful words in the English language are once upon a time. And modern neuroscience again confirms this. When we listen to a story, something fascinating happens to our brains. Multiple regions of our brains are activated, not just the language centers, but also our sensory, our emotional areas. If someone were to say the cinnamon sweet smell of apples, our olfactory cortex actually lights up. Oxytocin is released. This is a neurochemical that's linked to trust, linked to empathy, linked to connection. Stories engage us in a chronological cause and effect, making them easier to remember than raw data alone. And perhaps most importantly for the work that you do, people are more likely to act based on narrative persuasion than mere abstract facts. Our brains have made sense of the world through story because story simulates real life. It's how we prepare to make decisions. It's how we calculate risks. It's how we enter relationships. We are literally built, or as neuroscience suggests, hardwired to receive, remember, and respond to story. So why am I telling you all of this? Why am I taking you down these several paths of stories? In the public sector, the stakes are high. The missions are noble, the audiences are often really broad, and the information is very complex. Here's the challenge. Often public sector leaders, and you know much better than I, have to communicate with data, acronyms, jargon, dense policy briefs. But what do people actually connect with? Stories. Not facts, but meaning. Not programs, but people. Not complexity, but clarity with heart. We forget sometimes in the day-to-day minutia that policy is personal. Every line item affects someone's access to education, clean water, justice, dignity, you name it. And again, you know better than I, but when we talk, we only talk in abstractions. We use percentages, we use acronyms, we use those really overly technical terms, and we focus on bottom lines. We lose the very people we are trying to serve. Storytelling in the public sector specifically can humanize policy. People don't relate to systems, they relate to stories of people navigating those systems. Story can build trust. Story conveys emotion and authenticity. It can cut through skepticism and remind people the public servants are humans too. It can bridge complexity. A good story can make the complex simple. It can really make a message stick. And as I mentioned before, story can motivate action. From budget approvals to community engagement, data rarely moves people. As we saw in neuroscience, story does. You know, in the private sector, storytelling is about selling a product or a package, but in the public sector, storytelling builds legitimacy. It's how we justify funding, it's how we demonstrate impact, it's how we shape culture, it's how we earn trust of the public, and it's how we remind people in and outside of government why this work really matters. So it's not just fluff, it's not just a nice to have, it is strategic communication, and it really is mission critical. Let's compare. Data alone. If I were to say to you, 10,000 homes lost power in the storm, that's a data fact. But a story around the similar narrative, Maria, a nurse, lost power in her home during a storm. She was a single mom. Without refrigeration, her son's insulin spoiled. She had to drive 45 minutes with a scared child to find a pharmacy that was open with her son's medication available. Which one is going to move you more? Which one are you going to feel more viscerally connected to and to really understand the impact of that power grid going down? The story. Stories can create followership, which was recently cited. I think it was a study on the top 10 skills for transforming self. They did a study to understand what are the business and societal skills that are going to be most needed. This was just recently published. And one was the power of story and followership. Do you have the ability to bring people on a journey? Do you want them to follow you and follow you willingly, not just because they have to, because of your position or your hierarchy, but do they want to follow your ideas, your thinking? And if they do, you'll be much more likely to achieve more, to perform better, and to deliver results that are needed to do your work. Yeah, thanks, Jerome. I see storytelling from politicians when advocating for policies. Absolutely. It's what grounds these policies in reality, and it's what makes us cognitively remember the importance of the issues being discussed. Remember Simon Sinek? I'm sure he's a familiar face to many. He is everything. He's an author, inspirational speaker, TED talker. He really posits that you communicate your why through the power of story. And that's not just organizationally, that's not just in the public sector, but it's also individual. What is your individual leadership story? So I'm going to take a slight detour here and momentarily go down the path of individual story before then bringing us back to story at large and how we can really deliver powerful stories in a professional context. So going down the detour of individual story, activating purpose is impossible without storytelling. Individuals, such as ourselves, must learn to connect drives to the organizational purpose and to be able to articulate their personal story to others. So my invitation here, as some post work perhaps for today's session, and I will provide this again in a closing slide, so don't worry, you'll have time to capture it just a little bit later on. But spend some time with Simon Sinek's framework and trace back your actions to what is guiding you. Try to get to the root or the core of the why, the purpose behind your actions. Also, you may very well consider providing some time and space for your team members to do this personal story work as well. What is the why behind their story, their actions, and their behaviors? Who better to tell our story than ourselves? So using Simon's framework here, just spending a little bit of time going through it, we're going to start at that outer ring, the what. This is really your day-to-day actions as an individual. A great exercise to get to your what is to open your Outlook calendar. How are you spending your days? What are the guidelines of your daily work? This is a way into the core of the what. How are you structuring your day? What kind of meetings are you attending and why? How are they important to your what? Really try to understand and grasp the concept of what are you doing in your daily work. Once you've established that as a base, you're going to move in closer to the core and look at how. How digs a little deeper. How are you setting yourself apart? How do you differentiate those from you, from those around you? What is the competition looking like? What are your values and beliefs that guide your actions, that guide your what, that guide how you spend your days? And from there, you'll be able to get to the core, the why, the nucleus. This is the powerhouse of the well-oiled machine that is you. It answers that crucial and very difficult question: why do you exist? What is it that you believe in? What motivates you to do what you do and how you do? And why is that so important to the work that you're doing every day? What is your purpose? Now, of course, I'm tying this to a work context here, and we're looking specifically at the public sector, but this also applies to your personal life. This model, what do I do with my time? How is that critically important? And what is the why of who I am, is really important story work to do personally and professionally. Tracing your purpose with these three questions helps make it tangible for you. It's a guiding vision or mission statement to the life that you're living. Purpose is at the very core of your being, and knowing how to articulate that in the power of story will be a molten hot motivation to drive everything that you do. Just like our scientists are discovering new things about the Earth's core and the layers above it every single day, we also need to be archaeologists of our own minds, if you will. We have to decode layers, we have to get beneath the surface and understand the core that lies within our own personal purpose. So with that, that was a detour down individual story. I'm now going to bring us back to the broader context of storytelling in general, though my invitation very much still stands to do some of that personal why work. But let's come back to story overall and its place in the public sector. To lead with story, you're going to need two core skills. The first is content, and content is what you say. Quite simply, it's the information that you are there to convey. It's the ingredients of your message. It includes those emotional stakes, that human story. It, of course, brings in data. It has values and purpose embedded in the message. It speaks to Simon Sinek's why. All of that rolls up into the banner of content. Using this visual, it's what you've so carefully and thoughtfully placed in the box. That is your content. Delivery, the other pillar of storytelling, is how you say your content. That is your tone, your voice, your pauses, your facial expression, your posture, your presence overall, the energy and the emotion that you bring to the moment. And as we all know too well, no one will hear your content if your delivery isn't powerful. I'm pretty sure I can speak for most of us when I say we've all received a package of this type in our day, something that's been destroyed to the point where the content no longer resonates or cannot reach the intended audience. This is backed by science. Delivery is critically important. Studies from communication research, and Albert Mehrabi's classic study on this, many of you know, 7% of the impact actually comes from our words. So that content piece, 7% of impact. 38% come from the tone of our voice, and a whopping 55% comes from our body language. So while these exact percentages are debated over the years, the core idea is clear. Delivery matters more than content when it comes to impact. But here's the catch: delivery without content is empty. So your job as a leader is to align both. You have to craft that strong, clear, purpose-driven content and have to deliver it in a way that moves people. It's not an easy feat. So let's delve first into content. And we can take a look here at one simple but powerful tool to use while crafting your content. It's a framework called the ABT structure. And ABT is and, but therefore. This is an opportunity for you to create natural narrative tension. Here's an example. We work to deliver clean water to all neighborhoods and ensure quality standards are met. But you're introducing the tension at this point. Aging infrastructure and limited budgets threaten our progress. Therefore, this is the call to action. We're investing in smarter pipelines and real-time monitoring to serve every resident. So you can use this type of structure, the ABT structure, when building your content in all kinds of different modalities: speeches, policy briefs, team communications, elevator pitches. It is a great tool to have in your toolbox to very clearly set the framework for how to make content that resonates. A few more tips on content. Start with tension, not the background. Drop us right into the action. Like the pipes are eroding. We have a problem. And then perhaps leverage a quote, a video clip, or one of the most powerful things you have in your arsenal, a pause after a bold statement. Build the tension. Whenever possible, avoid using buzzwords, use plain spoken language, vivid as much as possible, bringing in story, bringing in Maria in the middle of the night going to get her son's insulin. Try and stay away from acronyms. We all assume everybody understands acronyms, and the vast majority of us spend the time going, what was that acronym again? So try to stay away from acronyms as much as possible. You can very easily lose your audience. Use that plain spoken language, and also be mindful of English as a second language when speaking to an audience. So try to slow your pace to accommodate that. Evoke emotion. This is where that why comes back in again. What's the emotional core driving the content? What are you there to try and convince people to do? What do you want them to adapt? What do you want them to invest in? What do you want to buy them into? Where do you want them to go? How do you want to move them? How can you do that in an emotional way? What's the heart of your story? Anchor in a person. As we've said, the brain is hardwired to connect to people, not programs. Instead of talking about a system, focus on a character, a resident, a team member, a frontline worker, whoever it may be. Highlight their desire, highlight the challenges, highlight the potential for transformation. This is sometimes called the hero's microjourney. Your audience can then see themselves in that story, and they're much more apt to go along with it and to be invested in it once they can see themselves mirrored. Make it visual. Please don't remember people don't remember abstractions, they remember pictures, even in policy. Replace infrastructure upgrade to pipes that are older than most of the people using them. Or replace equity with no child having to walk an extra 5 miles to get water. Use metaphors, sensory detail, concrete examples. All of this combined makes your story land. We'll now turn from content to delivery. As we've talked about, delivery is the bigger piece of the puzzle in order to get right. And it's not just about performance, it is about presence. Why does how you speak matter so much? Because every time someone listens to you, whether it's a colleague, a community member, cabinet secretary, they are spending something. They're not spending money, but they are spending cognitive effort. You must consider your audience and their cognitive load. We each only have so much of it available. It is a limited, finite resource. Our brains, as you all know, are bombarded with inputs all day long, every day. Emails, meetings, decisions, distractions. Think back to the Ringelmann effect and how hard it can even be to be staying engaged in this webinar today. So if you're asking someone to gain access to their attention, you need to understand that you're asking them to pay for something, something that they have limited access to. Think of it like this. There's a cost associated to listening. And as such, a monotone voice, fidgeting, lots of those filler words, they can act like a tariff. It makes your message a lot harder to process. They have to spend the time working as your audience to clear out the noise and try to focus on your message. If your delivery is flat or unclear, it's going to take a lot more effort to follow you. And over time, your audience can just check out. Not because they don't care, but because the price of admission is too high. Their brains are too cognitively full. The cost is just too much. So here on the left, you can see this image of a brain. It is just full. There's no more room for input. The piggy bank of our brain and our neurocortex is at capacity. So what can we do as leaders and as storytellers? How can we move from costly to clear? Strong delivery, our voice, pace, presence, all of that lowers the cost of listening. It signals to the brain, hey, this is worth your time. Good delivery just doesn't help people understand, it helps them care. And we can go even further. Clear delivery becomes crystallized delivery when your message is not just heard, it's also remembered. Your story becomes sticky. Your points get quoted back. Your message travels without you having to repeat it. It is cognitively free for your audience members to align with your mission and your message. So as leaders, let's ask ourselves, how do I earn the attention of my audience at the beginning? How do I hold the attention of my audience in the middle? And how do I leave a mark at the end? The answer is clear, with clear and confident delivery. Even the most powerful content gets lost if no one stays tuned in long enough to hear it. Good delivery helps make the content stick. So how do we deliver well? How does that beautiful package arrive unmarred, on time, ready to be unboxed with all of that great content inside? This package here to the left is one I don't often receive, but it would be lovely to receive an untarnished package. In storytelling, that comes down to, as I've said, voice, posture, energy, rhythm, all of it shapes story's impact. And delivery isn't about being theatrical or inauthentic. It is truly tapping into your authenticity, your connectedness, and your vision. Here are some techniques to really elevate your delivery as a leader. First up, voice. This is potentially one of the most powerful tools available to us. You can play with your volume, you can play with your range. You need to sound interested in what you are talking about. You can punch out certain words. You can try hitting the back of the room, really increase your volume. Use some diaphragmatic breathing to push out certain words and let your passion show. You can play around with your pitch. You can have some high pitch. You can get into some of your more lower registers and really play around with varying your pitch throughout your presentation. Do try to watch for upspeak. It's something that a lot of us do. It's very easy to do. And for those that don't know, upspeak is when you end a statement with a question. It makes you sound a lot less confident. Instead, make a declarative statement. Ground the end of your sentence. Some tips to do this: actually saying the phrase, I am confident in what I'm telling you. That evokes in us the ability to ground our pitch and to really center within us. I am confident in what I am telling you. It's really hard to say that sentence using upspeak at the end. Another tip is to visualize each of the end of your sentences with a period instead of a question mark. That will help ground the end of your sentence, really putting a fine point on it instead of bringing it up into that question and uncertain tone that sometimes we get into when we get into upspeak. Play around with your speed and your cadence. Change it up. We are hardwired to love surprise. Our brains perk up when we detect something that breaks the pattern. Let your passion show through. Move your lips more than normal. In fact, you have to exaggerate. It helps people understand what you're saying with greater ease. And as we've said, we want to reduce that cognitive load as much as possible. We all listen with our ears and our eyes. If, for example, I was to say dog without moving my lips too much, that's a higher cognitive cost for you because you're thinking, did she say dog? I think she said dog. Was it dog? Did I hear dog? And all of that is adding to your cognitive load. But if you, as the storyteller, move your lips and exaggerate, it's clear for the audience. Think of it as throwing a ball. You are trying to convey a message. You need to make it as easy as possible for them to catch it. Those dreaded filler words, the ums and ems of the world, they really do make us sound unsure. They are inherently distracting and they do get in the way of the message. We're all, of course, doing it without thinking about it. Those filler words spill in when we're not quite sure where to go next in our story. Our mouth is just sort of moving faster than our brain can keep up. It's like computer buffering. Instead, replace those ums with pauses. Pauses create impact. A tip on filler words, because I know this is a tough one for people, is to do a little role play and practice. Pick a topic, any topic. We can go back to our emojis. What was your week like this week? Tell me what you're doing this weekend. Any topic you can think of, and record yourself on your phone. Work hard at pausing and then watch it back. Repeat it a few times. See how many filler words you had in the first session versus in the final session, and see how far you were able to come along in removing filler words in just that short exercise. That will help you build confidence. Filler words, the way I like to think about them, they're like bug splatters on a windshield for your listener. It's like they're trying to drive down the highway and there's just bugs coming at them. They have to do a lot. They have to work hard to filter those filler words out, and that does add to their cognitive cost. Next up, eye communication. This is by far, and again backed by science, the most powerful tool you have to build connection. Look at your audience. Evenly distribute your gaze as much as possible. Look at both what I call the flames and the shadows in the room. And you know this well. Every room there are flames. There are people who burn bright. They speak up. They raise their hand. They take up space. But there are also the shadows, those quieter voices, the more subtle glances, the restrained emotions. And sometimes we spend our time trying to decipher if they're tracking or not. But don't let that throw you off. As a leader and as a storyteller, your job is to notice both the flames and the shadows and to welcome both into the story. Sometimes the real story is not the flame, but it's in the flicker in the corner of the room. With your eye communication, slow down. Deliver a single phrase or a sentence looking at just one person before you move on. Or you can use that 3 to 5 second rule, landing on someone for 3 to 5 seconds and moving on. Of course, when I'm talking about eye communication here, largely applicable to when you're in the room with people. But in a virtual setting, one of my favorite tips is to stick a little sticky face. This is a little smiley face. And to pop that right on your camera so that you remember to look up at your camera. Sometimes we find ourselves looking down at our screen. Some of us have a second screen or a third screen, and all of a sudden we're not looking at all at our audience. If you are just going to pop a little sticky of a smiley face right beside your camera, eyes meet eyes, and you'll be much more inclined to look at your camera if you see a smiley face up there. You can have fun with it too. You can put some googly eyes up there if you like, but I find that trick works really well. Next up is posture and movement. How are you holding yourself? Again, virtually and face to face on this one. In a virtual setting, how are you sitting in the scene? You're not too far back, but you're also not too close. What does your lighting look like? How is that evenly distributed on your face? Are you bright? Are you being really darkly lit? Take time to understand what your lighting is doing for you. Try not to be too high in the frame, and then also try not to be too low. If you're too high, you give the sense of being kind of cut off and too big, too loud. If you're too low, it actually diminishes your presence. So take a little bit of time and understand how you should sit within your frame. What does your backdrop look like? What is your background looking like? Are you using a virtual background or not? Should you leverage a green screen? All of these things can factor into delivery and presence. When you're in that face-to-face context, don't hide behind the podium, don't sway. Make sure you've got your feet shoulder width apart and stabilizing yourself as much as possible. And if you're going to use your hands, use them with purpose. In a virtual setting, be aware when they're in the frame and when they're not. Don't move them frenetically. That can be really distracting, especially in a virtual, because you've got that lag time. It can increase the cognitive cost for your audience. Use them with intention to help advance the story that you're telling. Leverage the power of pause. I've said it many times, but it is worth repeating. Build energy by running words together more quickly and then slow down for key phrases. Silence creates impact. And don't speak at a consistently the same pace. Vary it. For gestures and expressions, don't fiddle with those rings. Don't try to do the washing of the hands with the imaginary soap. Work with your hands and rest your hands. Facial expression is super important. In a virtual environment especially, the smile is key. Brings in warmth, it can instantly connect people. Remember, as the storyteller in the space, you are the emotional governor of the room. You need to exhibit the emotion that you want others to feel. If your exhibited emotion doesn't match your words, your listeners will trust the emotion over the message. I'm going to say that again. Your listeners will trust the emotion over the message. So if you come into the room saying, I feel nervous today, I don't think they're going to buy into this, your body will mirror that. And that's what your audience will trust. That's what they will feel, and that's what they will trust. But if you come into this space in a confident person, if your body exudes that confidence, if you want to bring people along on a journey, you know the journey, you want to bring them along, and you're invested emotionally in that story, they will follow suit. Your audience will show conviction and confidence in your message. It will resonate. So here's a little bit of work around how we can shift some of the things we might naturally be inclined to do when it comes to storytelling. We need to communicate our message by bringing both content and delivery together. So how can we shift from being presenters of the message to storytellers? Before sitting down, try a storyboarding process. This is a 3-step one. It's pretty easy. Step 1, just write all your ideas out as if you were telling a story to someone. Do not open the dreaded PowerPoint as your first step. Instead, piece of paper or notepad, virtual, whatever it may be, jot down your ideas as if you were telling a story to someone. And since we don't naturally use bullet points when we're telling stories, I offer that don't use them on your slides as much as possible. You'll see I have used a few here, but I do try to avoid them as much as possible. Step 2, after you've written out those ideas, visualize your concepts by storyboarding out some sketches. Maybe there's a quote that would really powerfully showcase this particular message. Maybe there's the visual. Maybe there's a video clip that you think will really land and drive home the importance of this data. So then step 3, start gathering some of those materials, assets, videos, images, animations, quotes. All of that brings story to life. Another point of research here, researchers found that your audience will only recall 10% of the content if they simply hear the information. but they'll recall a whopping 65% if they hear and see a picture of the information, which is why in storytelling work, we talk so much about the importance of images. This is known as the picture superiority effect. Basically, bringing pictures and data together is where the winning combination lies. Presenters, as it says here on the slide, tend to open a PowerPoint as the first step, while storytellers craft that narrative using the 3-step process that I just talked us through. Presenters often use text. Storytellers love the power of picture. When it comes to data, data is abstract and hard to conceptualize, and adding a face to a statistic whenever possible, a story, an example, humanizing it adds power. As I mentioned earlier on, our brains perk up when we detect something that breaks from a pattern. The human brain loves novelty. We love to be surprised. A really wonderful example of this, and many of you may know it, but in 2009, Bill Gates was asked to present at a TED Talk, and his topic was how to reduce the spread of malaria. He famously said, "Now, malaria is, of course, transmitted via mosquitoes. I brought some here just so you could experience them." And with that, he walked around the room and walked into the center of the stage, opened the lid from a small jar of, it's important to call out, non-infected mosquitoes. They had been pre-tested, and said, "We're just going to let those little guys roam around the auditorium for a bit." This moment was incredibly successful at capturing his audience's attention because it was a surprise. So while I'm not advocating for releasing mosquitoes in your next storytelling endeavor, I do think the more you can lean into surprise, the more powerful and in fact impactful your message will be. And last but not least, presenters practice silently. Storytellers rehearse out loud. They focus on their vocal delivery. They add those perfectly timed pauses. They review their pace. They look at their tonal range. They look at timing. They look at their facial expressions. A great story does it all. It informs, it inspires, it engages, and it entertains. So bringing all this together, one of my favorite acronyms, what I'll say or do differently on Monday, wisdom. Here's some homework and some takeaways that I offer you around story. That one sentence prompt. What do you do? Why do you do what you do? That personal leadership story. Write that out. Spend some time with Simon Sinek's framework. It's not just your job title, it's your personal leadership message. Crafting that, grounding in your why by first reviewing your what, which is how you spend your day, and your how, the values and beliefs guiding your actions. Pick up that ABT framework, and, but, therefore, and stating that status quo, but introducing that conflict and tension and doing that early. And therefore, here's the intended change, here's the ask, here's the call to action. And that delivery drill, record yourself telling a 60-second story, then replay it. Do it again. Where can I add a pause? How many filler words did I have? Where could I show more emotion? Repeat and see how you can improve over time. And if you're feeling brave enough, show it to someone you trust and ask for their feedback too. You don't need to be a TED Talker to be a great storyteller. These are quick changes. You could, for example, start a meeting with a story, not an agenda. You could do that starting tomorrow. You could use anecdotes instead of numbers when persuading others. You could tell stories that celebrate team wins and community impact. You can practice one story a day on your commute, with a colleague, team member, friend, at home, wherever it may be. Bring story into your arsenal as a leader. And so my challenge for you is, it's Wednesday today, before Friday this week, share one story about your work. That can be in a meeting, an email, on a Slack, at a public event, on your social media. Notice how people lean in differently. Notice how that message sticks. And then from there, look at the wisdom. What can I say and do differently on Monday? Starting on Monday and moving forward, how can I bring story into my world more fully? Feel free to grab a screen capture of this slide so you remember the prompts and the asks available here. I'm happy to just keep that up. And as I have that up, I'll just close out here today. You've all entered the public sector to make lives better. I deeply appreciate the work that each and every one of you do. Let people feel that through your stories. When you lead with story, you lead with clarity, you lead with connection and courage. Policy changes lives, don't forget it. But stories change minds and hearts. Thank you for your time and attention. Ringelman would be proud. I see the emojis coming in. I will hand it back over to Marissa now. I think we do have some time for any questions that might pop up, and I'll give her time to close out the session today. Thank you so much.
Lisa, thank you for such a fantastic presentation today. You definitely gave us a lot to think about and some great takeaways on how we all can use storytelling at work and in our daily lives. So thank you again for being with us today. Before we head into a Q&A session, just a few quick reminders. Yes, this session was recorded. You will receive an email tomorrow with the link, and you can always find it on our website at www.cpshr.us. At CPS HR Consulting, we are proud to support the public sector agencies with services like recruitment, training, test rental, classification and compensation, compliance, and so much more. If you're looking for strategic HR support, we are here to help. And finally, we'd really appreciate it if you could complete the short survey that will pop up at the end of this session. Your feedback helps us make future webinars even better. Thank you again, Lisa, and thank you to all of you for spending time with us today. Be sure to join us on July 16th for our webinar on internal pay equity. We hope to see you there. I will also post the links in the chat to learn more about CPS HR and the link on where you can find the webinar recording later today. In the meantime, we have a few minutes for questions. If anyone would like to type their question in the webinar chat, please feel free. You may also request to come off of mute, and I'll take you off there if you would like to ask your question with your own voice. Try out that storytelling, huh?
Absolutely. I see a couple of questions in the chat, Marissa, if you'd like me to pick those up as a starting point.
Sure. Yes. While I hit the links in here, go ahead and pick whichever one you'd like.
Any insight for storytelling for an interview? That's a great question, Melissa. Is that as the interviewee or the interviewer would be a question back, but yes, lots of opportunity to build in story in an interview. Simply opening it up with, tell me about yourself, behavioral questions, tell me about a time that, whatever the context, what is a story that lands with you specifically in XYZ environment or context, ground in the context, see if they have a specific story that can bring it to life. One thing that comes to mind for me is, and this is potentially not exactly answering your question, but in an organization that I work for, they start every meeting with a mission moment. So they talk about a story around their organization. It is a healthcare organization, and it's how healthcare has impacted them specifically, and how the organization was there for, let's say, a family member going through a treatment, and they may be a nurse that had an interesting experience with a colleague. They welcome those stories into that space. And so that becomes part of the interviewing that gets done in that organization. It becomes sort of part of the roadmap of things that get documented in their rubric. So that could be there's also the STAR framework. So situation, task, action, result. That's a good storytelling structure. What was the situation? What's the context here? What was your goal or your challenge? What did you do? Action, and what happened? What was the result? So again, if you're that interviewer, that could be a good pickup. Let's see. Thank you. Oh, I feel like
I saw one come in from Jerome.
Okay, great.
He asked, how do you not lose audience attention from pausing?
Oh, Jerome, pausing is one of the most powerful tools in communication. When it is done right, you are not going to lose your audience. Think about it in juxtaposition to filler words. Filler words, you just gonna naturally, people are gonna just start to tune that out. But putting in a powerful pause can really build tension. And people, it's a natural arc. People are going to lean in a moment of pause, especially if you build it correctly. It is about how you leverage the runway coming to the pause. So you want to quicken your words, you want to build up that tension, use some gestures, and then land with impact. That's a good way to think about it. It's almost like some of the roller coaster emojis that we saw earlier on. You're sort of building, 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 and then there's that pause right at the top before you go right down on the roller coaster. If you build the pause effectively, you are going to do the opposite of losing your audience. They are going to be leaning in, waiting with bated breath to hear what comes next.
Thanks, Lisa. I saw one come in the Q&A. What would you recommend to improve the way you tell the story, such as your cadence or delivery?
So cadence is the general speed unto which you speak. Varying your cadence is the most important thing. You want to have we do this very naturally when we're not in front of an audience and it's not a PowerPoint slide. When we're telling a story to friends and family, Marissa and I were just talking before the call, it's so easy to tell stories around the dinner table and to kind of heighten that experience for people and build the tension. But when we're in a formal presentation setting, our cadence becomes very consistent very quickly. And it's because we're dealing with a whole host of other things. We're nerves, we have anxiety, we're wondering what I'm doing next. We're looking at the flames and the shadows and we're wondering what they're thinking of us. There's this whole second conversation that's happening that's actually decreasing our cognitive load. And so our job is to put that to the side and really get back to our storytelling roots. Who am I when I'm telling a story to friends, family, loved ones? How can I bring that version of myself into my leadership role? And if you start to do that, you'll notice that your cadence just kind of naturally shifts to where you would normally be comfortable in storytelling.
Thank you. And then we have the last one we've got time here for is Justin. He asked, I am preparing to ask my voters for a levy. I like to talk and tell stories to convey the message, and my staff and commissioning board want to adhere to a strict script. I can do a blend. However, if you have any insight, tips, or tricks to help me sell the story to my internal group,
So they
that would
want
be
stick to a strict script, and does that contain any story, Justin? I guess that is there examples there? Is there data? Can we work on br- leveraging data in a human way? So can we work on bar graphs? Yeah, see, that's where we get a little hung up. Bar graphs, pie charts. Yeah. So what can we do to humanize those a little bit and to make that data stick? I think that's where I would dig into because the data is really important. We've got to see the numbers. We've got to see the bottom line. We've got to see the percentages in the pie graph. It's all got to be there. But how can we really tell the story of that data in a way that lands? And I would look to human story to do that as much as possible. I know you've got a strict script there, but it sounds like you have a little wiggle room to to insert some story.
Thanks, Justin. Hope that helps. And that looks like that's all the time all we have time for today, and we don't have any questions left. So perfect timing. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our instructor, Lisa, today, and we hope to see you next month. Everyone have a fantastic rest of your week.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.